For 10 years, my family told me I was struggling because I wasn't trying hard enough. They watched me work multiple jobs, pile up debt, and just completely exhaust myself trying to stay afloat. And all that time, they were living a life of luxury I couldn't even imagine. New cars, exotic vacations, a gorgeous new home. They said it was just the result of hard work and smart investments, and I believed them. What I didn't know was that they were living that life with my money, an inheritance they stole from me when I was just a teenager. They called it family duty, I call it theft. It all started the year I turned 16. That was the year my grandmother, the most important person in my life, passed away. She wasn't just a grandmother to me. She was my safe space. My parents were always a little distant, and my older brother, Mark, was off in his own world. But Grandma, she was my person. Her house was my second home, a place that always smelled like baking bread and felt like unconditional love. She was the one who actually encouraged my dream of becoming a writer, telling me my imagination was a gift, even when everyone else called it impractical. Her death left a huge hole in my world. The funeral was just a blur of black clothes, and people saying they were sorry. I remember my parents pulling me aside afterward, looking all somber and speaking in low, comforting tones. "Don't you worry about a thing," my dad said, patting my shoulder. "Grandma made sure everyone is taken care of." They told me she'd left me a small trust fund, something to help with college later on, but they explained, since I was still a minor, they would have to manage it for me. It was for the best, they said. It would be safer with them. When you're 16 and drowning in grief, you don't question your parents. You don't ask to see paperwork. You don't doubt the people who are supposed to protect you. The word betrayal isn't even in your vocabulary at a time like that. I just nodded, grateful that in the middle of all that pain, there was one less thing to worry about. They were my family. I trusted them completely. And that trust was the biggest mistake of my life. I had no idea their comforting words were the start of a decade-long lie that would cost me my youth, my financial stability, and my belief in what family even means. I moved out at 18, ready to make my own way in the world. I wanted to prove to my family and myself that I could do it. The first few years were exactly what I expected, a total grind. I went to community college and worked nights as a waitress to cover tuition and rent on a tiny apartment. But then the years started to stack up, and the grind just never stopped. I graduated, got a low-paying job in my field, but it wasn't nearly enough. I was constantly juggling 2, sometimes 3, part-time jobs just to make ends meet. Every single paycheck was a frantic calculation of which bills had to be paid asterisk right now asterisk, and which could wait another week. Debt became this permanent shadow, a monster of student loans and maxed-out credit cards I used for things like groceries and car repairs. Meanwhile, something strange was happening with my family. Their finances had taken a dramatic turn for the better. The first clue was the new house, a sprawling, 2-story home in a gated community. I felt out of place just driving through. Then came the brand new luxury, SUVs in the driveway. My brother Mark, who'd always been kind of mediocre at his sales job, was suddenly driving a sports car. My parents started taking these lavish international cruises, posting photos from Paris, Rome, the Caribbean. Whenever I'd ask, my voice small with a mix of curiosity and envy, the answers were always polished and vague. "Oh, your father got a big promotion," my mom would say with a dismissive little wave. Mark finally closed a huge deal. Or my personal favorite, "We've been saving and investing wisely for years." It's all about financial discipline. That phrase, financial discipline, became their weapon. Every time I mentioned my struggles, their advice was coded in this condescending pity that felt more like judgment. "Maybe you should have chosen a more practical career," my dad would suggest. "You were always such a dreamer." My mom would add, "If you just budgeted better, maybe you wouldn't be in this position." Mark was the worst. He'd look at my beat-up old car and say things like, "You just have to want it more. No one's going to hand it to you." The gaslighting was constant and brutal. They made me believe that my financial problems were my fault, a personal, moral failing. The shame was suffocating. I felt like a total disappointment, like I was wasting the potential my grandmother had seen in me. I'd lie awake at night, crushed by the weight of my debt, wondering what was so broken inside me that I couldn't succeed while they made it look so easy. It never once crossed my mind that I was the one paying for all of it. The lie that defined my life for a decade started to unravel because of a burst pipe. My parents were on another one of their extravagant vacations, a 2-week tour of Southeast Asia. I was the only one in town with a key, left with the thrilling job of watering their plants. One evening, I get a frantic call from their next-door neighbor about water pouring out from under the garage door. My heart just sank. I raced over and found the basement flooded, water shooting out of a copper pipe on the far wall. After I shut off the main water line and called an emergency plumber, I started the awful task of moving soggy cardboard boxes off the floor. Most were just old holiday decorations and junk, but one box, tucked away in a dark corner, was completely saturated. As I lifted it, the bottom just gave out, spilling everything across the concrete in a damp, messy pile. And that's when I saw it. In the middle of some mildewing photo albums was a thick manila folder, warped and stained, with my grandmother's name written on the tab in my mother's handwriting. My stomach twisted into a knot. I know I shouldn't have looked, but some instinct, some deep suspicion that had been buried for years, made me pick it up. My hands were shaking as I opened the clasp. The first thing I saw was a copy of my grandmother's will. I scanned the pages of legal jargon until I found the section about what she left behind. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a small trust fund. It was asterisk everything asterisk. The house, the stocks, the savings, the bulk of her entire estate, valued at an amount that made me feel dizzy, was left to me in a trust. Then I saw the other papers filed behind the will. Legal documents, petitions filed with the court, and then the final, soul-crushing piece of the puzzle. A document signed by my parents, acting as my legal guardians just weeks after Grandma's funeral. It was an application to dissolve the trust she had created for me and transfer every single asset into a new one, the family name, family trust, a trust where they were the only trustees and beneficiaries, with complete and total control. It was all there, in black and white. The betrayal was so total, so brazen, it didn't even feel real. And then the last 10 years snapped into sharp, horrifying focus, the new house, the luxury cars, the condescending advice. It was all an act, a grand play staged on the back of my stolen future. The rage hit first, a white-hot fire that burned through the shock. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had watched me drown and told me it was my fault I couldn't swim. My first impulse was to call them, to scream, to demand they explain. But then a cold, clear thought cut through the anger. Gather evidence. I laid every single page out on the dry floor of the living room and took out my phone. I photographed everything, every signature, every date, every account number. The shame that had weighed me down for a decade was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. In the quiet of that flooded basement, I realized I wasn't just documenting evidence. I was writing my family's obituary. This was a fight for my life, and it was just beginning. The next morning, I found a probate litigation attorney who specialized in inheritance theft. I walked into her office with a folder of printed photos and a decade of pain. She listened to the whole story, her expression getting sterner with every detail. When I finished, she looked at the photos of the documents and said, "They never thought you'd find this. They actively concealed it." She explained that while there are usually time limits to sue for fraud, my case was a textbook example of the discovery rule. The clock didn't start when the theft happened, but when I found out about it, our case was strong. The first step wasn't a lawsuit. It was a formal demand letter. My attorney drafted a brutal, 10-page document that laid out the evidence in excruciating detail. It ended by listing the consequences they were facing, not just repaying all the money, but also punitive damages, my legal fees, and even potential criminal charges for fraud. We sent it by certified mail. The call came 2 days later. It wasn't my father. It was my mother, her voice a high-pitched shriek. "How could you?" she screamed. "After everything we've done for you. We are your family." There was no apology, no remorse, just pure outrage that I had dared to expose them. That call led to one last, disastrous family meeting. We all sat at the polished dining room table in the house my money had paid for. I put a copy of the key documents right in the center. "I know everything," I said. The excuses started pouring out. "We were just managing it for you." My father insisted. "You were 16. You would have just blown it all. So you decided to blow it all for me?" I shot back. My mother tried a different tactic, her eyes filling with crocodile tears. "We did this for the family, to give everyone a better life, to give your brother a good start." I looked at Mark. He'd been silent, just staring at the papers with a pale, clammy look on his face. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when he finally spoke, and his voice was dripping with an arrogance that chilled me to the bone. "Family duty? You were a kid. Someone had to step up. Blood owes blood, not handouts to a dreamer who ran off at 16. And that was it. That was the moment any last shred of hope I had for this family died. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some misguided attempt to protect me. It was theft, plain and simple, justified by a twisted belief that I never deserved the money in the first place. My dreams, my struggles, they meant nothing. To them, I was just a resource to be used. I stood up from the table. This was never about family duty. I said, my voice shaking with cold fury. This was about greed. We're done talking. I walked out of that house and never looked back. The next day, my attorney filed the lawsuit. The war had begun. The legal battle was emotionally exhausting. It forced me to relive every lie, every moment of condescension. But with each step, I also felt myself getting stronger. The court immediately froze their assets, cutting them off from the money they'd gotten so comfortable with. Then came the court-ordered accounting, which was even more damning than I imagined. It was a forensic map of their betrayal, tracing my inheritance through their bank accounts to pay for mortgages, car leases, designer clothes, and five-star hotels. Faced with undeniable proof of their fraud and the public humiliation of a trial, they finally caved. They knew if it went before a judge, they'd lose everything and could face even worse. They agreed to settle. The resolution was swift and merciless. They were forced to sell the house. They had to liquidate their investments and sell the luxury cars. Every single asset they had acquired with my money was turned back into cash. By the time it was over, I had recovered the full amount of my inheritance, a significant portion of the interest it should have earned, and all of my legal fees. They were left with practically nothing, stripped of the fake life they had built on my back. I got the money back, but I lost the people I once called my family. There's a quiet peace in my life now, a freedom from the weight of their judgment and their lies. But there's also a scar that will never fully go away. The biggest betrayal isn't about the money. It's realizing the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally just saw you as an obstacle. The real inheritance my grandmother left me wasn't the money. It was the strength I found to fight for myself. And that makes me wonder, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have fought back, no matter the cost to the family? Or would you have tried to keep the peace? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, or are fighting your own battle for what's right, please know you are not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Your support truly means the world.